2001, I just finished at MIT, and I had a classical engineering degree, and I studied all forms of engineering and how to make things. And I'm an aeronautical engineer, so if you don't make them right, the plane falls out of the sky and everybody dies. Yeah. And when I read the book, it struck me as this is someone describing the world run rationally, full of rational actors doing the right thing for the obvious reason, because if you don't do the right thing, the economy falls out of the sky, the world comes to a grinding halt. And so it's always stood for rationality and order and life. And I just found it to be incredibly inspiring. When I read the book, I couldn't put it down, primarily because she does such a good job of articulating the human misery that occurs when someone tries to use brute force to interfere with the order of nature or the rational order of things. And so I thought that was very inspirational for me. It inspired me to go into business when I was 24, and it drove a lot of my actions in the years that followed. And published in 2012. So my day job kept me busy in the software business, but my evening, avocation was looking at all different types of technology and investing in some. And my view of Bitcoin from 2012 on to 2020 was, it was cool, scary, dangerous, threatening, maybe revolutionary stuff, but I couldn't be bothered with it. And I had a bet. I liked Apple stock better, right? Or I liked Facebook better. I thought Google maybe was better, and I didn't really need it. And I went about my day job, which is running MicroStrategy, and my investment, in my copious free time was, speculating in Facebook or Apple or Google or Amazon stock. And it wasn't until the world came to a grinding halt in March of 2020 that all of a sudden I had a problem. My faith in the system, the overall economic and political system, was broken, and my faith in the money was broken. And now this became a billion-dollar problem, and I rediscovered Bitcoin once I had a gun to my head. And then I realized it isn't just a interesting, scary, random technology, but maybe it's the. I thought it was a cautionary tale, and she was writing about the problems in the Russia in the 30s. And she was writing about the problems behind the Iron Curtain, and this is what might happen in America if we ended up, ruled by a Stalin or a Mao or whatever. And I was and I think that I was oblivious to the encroaching authoritarian regulation and centralized control. Because I didn't really have an appreciation of what is money and what is inflation. In fact, I legitimately didn't really understand money or inflation until the year 2020. And
you understand it now.
And I don't consider myself to be stupid, right? And objectively, I was reasonably successful as an academic, at MIT. I was the top of my class, and I was first in my class in high school, and I was reasonably successful in business. I took company public. But with all of that academic and I made a ton of money as an investor. So with all my success, I really just had a massive blind spot. Wealth, which is how you store your productivity over time in the bank, and that's in the currency. So, I would say back then I thought, well, it's cautionary tale and it's allegorical and it's like Animal Farm and 1984, right? All these things that might happen to us. And today I would say, yeah, I guess it all happened, right? Like 40 years later, it was happening. It was happening in the money from 1971. Once we went off the gold standard, the money was losing 7% of its value a year from 1971, which means that centralized authorities were stealing 7% of everything you had from you every year since 1971. But I didn't understand it. My family didn't understand it. And I think that on the other side, right, with regard to regulatory encroachment, I think it's pretty obvious now, right, that we have, especially in the past 20 years, you've seen regulatory encroachment in so many areas of business for so many different reasons that is kind of unprecedented in the history of America. But it was always there. So I would say, yeah, whatever we thought was a problem somewhere else has arrived to be a problem here today. And so the book is apocryphal and I guess fairly instrumental in informing us. And the currency is the fluid through which the energy moves in order to run the machines of the economy. Then destroying the money is the same as opening up, one of your arteries and bleeding you to death, or sucking all the oxygen out of a room, or pulling all the hydraulic fluid out of a machine. In fact, the economy just comes to a grinding halt. And the subtle thing, of course, is that if you keep sucking 7% of the value or 10% of the value out of the currency every year, the half-life of the money becomes 7 or 10 years. And if the half-life of the money becomes 10 years, you cut it in half 10 times in a century. If you don't suck the energy out of the currency, the half-life of the money is forever. And so what we think of as death or a natural life cycle, if there wasn't a parasite that's actually sucking the energy out of them, killing them. So the debasing of the money is kind of like artificially accelerating the destruction of the entire economy. And so therefore, there's no point in striving for anything great 100 years out or 500 years out or 50 years out if the useful life of the economic energy is 7 years. And it's kind of like your kid is an Olympic athlete and they're about to run for the gold medal, and I just show up and I just let you know that I'm going to bleed them a pint of blood every day for the next 7 days before their race to help them out, and then you realize that they have zero chance of winning and there's no point in competing. So if we don't have good money, then every other aspiration it's either going to result in a suboptimal, impaired, crippled outcome, or it's going to result in failure. And it would be quite a trick for me to get you to focus all your time on training for the marathon while I bleed you every night.